That's awfully kind of you, Bob. You know, Alabama's my home. As always, but let's go to our home, guy.
Neon once buzzed above every county line bar, promising jukebox miracles in exchange for 2 quarters and a little faith. But drive that same road tonight and every bulb is spitting sparks or already dark. Your headlights catch the ghost of a cardboard roadside poster. The face on it once ruled the airwaves, now it's peeling in the rain while an old portable radio on the passenger seat spits static around a forgotten chorus. Between those pops and hisses, you hear the question, nobody in Nashville likes to ask out loud, how can a voice that moved a nation die with nothing but pawn tickets in its pocket? Today we're opening that glove box full of ruined contracts and broken dreams, pressing play on 17 stories that prove applause is the loudest right before the silence. Some left us in crash metal, some behind prison walls. One is still breathing but balancing on the same cliff. And every single one can still make the dashboard rattle if you dare turn the dial far enough back, because what you'll hear isn't just music. It's a ledger of disappeared fortunes whispering through the chorus before dawn steals them again forever. Hank Williams Sr. was country music's first supernova, blasting across honky-tonk ceilings with a voice that sounded like heartbreak learning to yodel. But inside that glitter, he was held together by painkillers, corn liquor, and the false promise that a hit single solved everything. By 29, his back was twisted, his heart swollen from amphetamine doctors called medicine, and his finances were as tangled as the mic cords he kept tripping over. Ex-manager lawsuits nipped at his boots while the IRS mapped every beer-soaked stage he'd skipped. He died in the back seat of a powder blue Cadillac on New Year's Day, 1953, alone but for a teenage driver who didn't realize the legend behind him had already slipped away somewhere between Knoxville fog and West Virginia snow. When the will was read, there was no trust fund, only IOUs, a guitar with Hawkshop tags still dangling, and a stack of unpaid child support receipts that fluttered like confetti for a party nobody came to. Lefty Frizell drew vowels out like taffy, teaching future troubadours how to make a syllable sigh. But when the jukeboxes changed, he kept chasing yesterday through bottom-shelf whiskey and handshake deals that felt friendly right up until the paperwork arrived. Royalty statements came printed on smoke. Sometimes they never came at all. He bought houses for cousins, Cadillacs for strangers, and bar rounds for whole zip codes, confident another tour would cover the tab. Instead, he suffered a stroke at 47 in a rented Nashville suburb. The lights turned off that same week for non-payment. The day he was buried, the Grand Ole Opry dimmed its stage lamps in mourning, yet the family car wouldn't start because the gas card was maxed. Every singer who bends a note owes him something, but Lefty's own checking account closed at zero, with a shrug. Patsy Cline's voice could slide across heartbreak the way moonlight slides across a knife, but the contract she signed at 23 carved deeper than any lyric. 4 shows a night, endless bus rides, and a split so lopsided her label made more selling souvenir programs than she earned singing Crazy. When her small plane pitched into that Tennessee forest in 1963, she was just 30 and still paying off stage dresses a seamstress refused to release without cash. Fans flooded record shops the next morning, money finally pouring in, yet little reached her widow or children. Clauses and subclauses siphoned pennies into boardroom pockets as cold as airplane aluminum. Today, Crazy still spins on diner jukeboxes, but when the royalty meter climbs, it mostly clocks time for people whose names you'll never read on a marquee. Even her rhinestone stage boots were still on layaway. Johnny Paycheck snarled, "Take this job and shove it," then lived the line until the job shoved back. He swaggered through court dates the way others stroll through stage doors, once even squeezing a trigger in a barroom argument that ended with him serving time and scribbling lyrics on prison stationery. Coke dust and unmarked pills ate whatever his lawyers didn't, and when he finally staggered home, the IRS had already auctioned the furniture. In his last years, he performed from a wheelchair in a care facility southwest of Nashville, the linoleum cafeteria echoing where applause used to roar. Nurses thought he was just another patient who liked humming. Most never knew gold records once carried his name. His bank statements certainly didn't remember. Each one arrived blank except for fees, like a punchline nobody laughed at. The jukebox stayed silent. Boxcar Willie marketed himself as the last singing hobo, but the romance of rails feels different when the boxcar is a discount motel room with flickering neon that reads, "Vacancy," even when you're inside. Late-night TV ads in the 80s made him a brief household name. Cassettes flew off shelves while he grinned beside plastic boxcars on morning shows. What viewers didn't see was the minivan parked behind the studio, loaded with costumes he couldn't afford to replace and medical bills for a cancer that kept coming back. He spent final tours at flea markets selling autographed photos next to vendors hawking boiled peanuts. When the curtain finally fell in 1999, he left a will that listed 2 guitars, 3 train whistles, and a checking account balanced on single digits. He joked rust was his late retirement plan, a laugh that sounded too true. Spade Cooley once packed dance halls with western swing that sounded like sunshine riding a fiddle bow, but behind the rhinestones lurked a jealousy so violent it rewrote his legend in blood. After he beat and fatally injured his wife, a jury swapped his Hollywood tux for prison denim, and the only stage he saw was the inmate talent show. Even there, he clung to spotlight, conducting jailhouse bands. In 1969, he collapsed from a heart attack during a special furlough concert, the applause still ringing when the microphone hit the ground. He died owing legal fees, burial expenses, and a debt that can't be measured in dollars. Every future radio spin of his songs felt like a ghost raising its hand, asking who was left to collect the check. His fiddle ended up in a pawn window 2 streets over. Blaze Foley kept his master tapes in duct tape boots, drifting from couch to couch with a guitar that moaned like busted screen doors, convinced the right dive bar crowd could change the world. Record executives loved the myth, but not the math. They passed, and Blaze kept passing the hat. In 1989, he was shot defending an elderly friend during a rent dispute, the kind of neon tragedy Austin bartenders still whisper about after last call. He died at 39, $20 in his pocket, and no insurance for the funeral. Years later, stars like Willie Nelson recorded his songs, and suddenly royalties flowed. To creditors first, then relatives, never to Blaze, who remained where hardship had left him. A legend written in Sharpie on a barroom restroom door. Bar owners paid him in whiskey, promising cash that never arrived. Mel Street sang about torchlit affairs and borrowed angels, but away from the mic he wrestled shadows no spotlight could chase off. Depressed, drowning in unpaid bills, and certain the industry had already turned the page, he took the final exit on his 43rd birthday with the phone ringing from collection agencies. In small-town West Virginia, the news landed like a stone in still water. Brief ripples, then quiet. Masters gathered dust, fans whispered what-ifs, and the estate paperwork listed more liabilities than assets. Even his gravestone was paid for by friends passing a hat at the VFW Hall, the same place Mel once packed on Saturday nights when people still believed songs could save a man. Radio DJs played a tribute special that night, and listeners wept, unaware the on-air sponsor hadn't paid him a dime of royalties in years. Hank Snow crossed continents in a gold-plated Cadillac emblazoned with his name, yet by the twilight of his 90-foot career, the car sat rusting behind a nursing home while attorneys wrangled over publishing. Snow had trusted a manager who treated royalty statements like scratch-off tickets, cashing the winners and misplacing the rest. Medical costs for emphysema swallowed what little remained, and the man who once yodeled to packed arenas now looked for spare change in a drawer full of fan letters. When he died in 1999, the Opry thundered with tributes, but the checkbook balanced at nearly zero, a caution printed in ledger ink. At night, orderlies wheeled him onto a porch where he could hear the faint echo of Opry broadcasts, and each steel guitar lick was a reminder of dollars unaccounted for, drifting somewhere between corporate ledgers and forgotten jukebox tallies. Jim Reeves crooned so smooth DJs called him gentleman, but gentility didn't shelter his estate after a 1964 plane crash left his widow tangled in lawsuits thicker than Tennessee kudzu. Bootleggers flooded the market with unreleased demos. Shady promoters forged signatures. A distant cousin claimed half the catalog. Courtrooms ate royalties faster than jukeboxes could earn them. Years passed before the dust settled, and by then inflation had gobbled what victory delivered. Fans kept slow dancing to "He'll Have to Go," never knowing the family behind that velvet baritone was filling grocery carts with coupons. To keep the lights on, Mary Reeves opened a tourist museum in their old Nashville home, guiding strangers past the velvet suits while recounting courtroom sagas like campfire horror stories. Visitors snapped photos, bills still stacked higher than the framed gold records on the hallway piano. Charlie Walker spent decades barnstorming beer joints, his twang sharp enough to slice cigarette smoke, but jukebox spins don't always translate to pension plans. He charted modest hits, yet each new single meant more radio promo debt, more wardrobe costs, more motel nights with flickering vacancy signs. By the time liver cancer set in, hospital bills outpaced performance fees, and the man who once sang, "Pick me up on your way down," couldn't afford the lift. His obituary praised a long, distinguished career, but the estate inventory fit in one cardboard box. During chemo, he still dragged himself onto tiny stages, duct taping the mic to a stand when his hands shook, cracking jokes about doctors who charged by the minute. The laughter helped sell beer, but club owners skimmed the door and mailed sympathy instead of checks on the ride home. Hank Williams Jr. isn't in the ground, he's on the road tonight growling through a set list that still echoes his father. But don't let the rowdy bravado fool you. After a 1975 mountain cliff fall shattered his skull, he spent months learning to speak again while label accountants quietly tallied the tour cancellations. Rumors swirled about prescription cocktails, IRS liens, and a catalog mortgage to keep everything afloat. In the 80s, he roared back with outlaw anthems, yet even now, bankruptcy whispers trail his tour bus like exhaust. He once joked that royalty checks evaporate faster than a shot of bourbon in July heat, and the laughter sounded nervous. One canceled festival, one missed payment, and the heir to country's most famous surname could be balancing on the same tightrope that snapped so many before him. A living footnote reminding us the story isn't finished just because the record spins. Townes Van Zandt wrote songs that felt like postcards from a dream you half forgot, yet he traded their publishing rights for bar tabs and cab fare, laughing as if genius were a practical joke. Friends found royalty checks crumpled in ashtrays, unopened. Addiction dragged him through detox wards and flop houses until at 52, his heart gave out in a friend's trailer where the electricity had just been shut off. The local morgue clerk had to borrow a suit for the viewing. Years later, Poncho and Lefty earned stadium sing-alongs, but Townes rests beneath an unassuming stone that lists no chart positions and no estate balance. His royalty administrator later confessed that uncashed checks still today arrive, some worth thousands, stacked in a locked drawer because nobody knows who to endorse them to, without sparking yet another probate nightmare. Tommy Duncan lent Bob Wills the velvet baritone that made Western swing, yet contracts named him a sideman, not a partner. When disagreements flared, he was shown the bus door and spent the rest of his life rattling between roadhouses, cashing $50 checks while songs he fronted sold millions. He died of heart failure in 1967 in a roadside motel 2 hours from his next gig. The promoter replaced him that night without issuing refunds. The estate inventory listed a battered suitcase, a stage suit smelling of cigarette smoke, and unpaid mileage notes scribbled on matchbooks. Friends say his voice still echoes on West Texas radio at sundown, but playlists don't cut residuals to the departed. The motel manager boxed his belongings and sent them collect to a P.O. box already closed for non-payment by the estate months earlier. David Allan Coe built a legend out of tall tales and tattoos, but the wildest numbers were the ones on his bankruptcy filings. He bought custom buses faster than auditors could seize them, feuded with labels over unpaid royalties, and in 2005 the IRS padlocked his Florida ranch, hauling away everything from guitars to the jukebox in the kitchen. Even after a near-fatal 2013 auto accident left him hobbling, he kept touring flea market arenas to pay medical costs and back taxes. Whisper Factories announced his death more than once in 2024, yet the truth is harsher. He's alive, selling t-shirts out of a van, each autograph a stopgap against a debt snowball still rolling downhill. Backstage, he signs vinyl copies of outlaw classics he no longer owns the masters to, shrugging when fans ask where the streaming money actually goes. Johnny Horton chased history songs to the top of the charts, but real history blindsided him on a foggy Texas bridge in 1960. His sudden death froze royalties in litigation between a previous label, his widow, and an ex-manager who claimed to have discovered him at a bait shop jukebox. By the time agreements were signed, inflation had eaten the profits like moths through parade bunting. The kids received trust funds just large enough for used cars and community college, a far cry from the Gold Rush fans imagined when they heard that cannon boom inside the Battle of New Orleans. Old royalty statements typed on onion skin paper listed fractions of pennies for each radio spin. Lawyers joked it would cost more to calculate the balance than to pay it, so nobody ever bothered, leaving history to foot the bill. Jimmy Martin crowned himself king of bluegrass, but the Grand Ole Opry never mailed his invitation, and that snub ate him alive. He toured relentlessly to prove them wrong, yet the money race was unwinnable. Hospital bills for diabetes, repossessed tour buses, and bar tabs big enough to wallpaper his cabin. In his final months, he pawned cherished Martin guitars engraved with his own name, exchanging royalty history for rent. When cancer ended the fight in 2005, fans lined the funeral route with banjos. But inside the casket there was no savings bond, just a folded set list stained by sweat and whiskey. He once told a reporter that applause doesn't buy insulin, then laughed so hard he knocked over a mic stand. The clip never aired. The network worried sponsors wouldn't like the taste of honesty backstage that night either. The highway you started on has gone full dark now, neon cracked, signs missing letters so the words read like warnings. You pull over, kill the engine, and in that hush, every story you just heard presses against the windows like frost. 17 voices, one pattern, art that filled America's Friday nights, yet emptied the pockets that created it. They sang because they had to. They spent because tomorrow finally felt safe, and the industry counted every chorus while pretending the math was magic. How can a song earn millions while its writer rests beneath a headstone bought on credit? The answer drifts through the static. It happens when listeners forget to look past the marquee and into the ledger, when applause replaces accountability. So before you turn the key and head back toward the glow of the present, do one defiant thing. Play their music for the stars. Remember the cost. Let that small rebellion ring longer than any chart position.